Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Ahlulbayt Live on Ahlulbayt TV in the month of Muharram, and this is a live show going out about 2:30 p.m. UK time GMT. My guest is Sheikh Usama Al Attar, and today we're going to be reflecting upon the theme of courage in light of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. How can we have courage in this day and age with regard to obviously the situation of followers of Ahlulbayt alayhi salam around the world, and especially with regard to, again, people who may be living in safer countries? How can they have courage when they're living actually in relative safety? So do feel free to call in with any questions or comments. Assalamu alaikum, welcome.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
And thank you again for giving us your time.
It's always a pleasure.
Thank you. Before we go into our discussion in more depth, perhaps we can reflect upon what courage is. What is courage?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salamu ala Muhammadin wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. In some definitions, they define courage as the state of the mind or the ability to face basically danger or fear, and with bravery, with resolution, with confidence. And maybe we can define it as also having components, parts. There is courage that can stem from, it has to stem from within, basically. Yeah. So it's an attribute, a characteristic. Some people appear to have courage, but there are those who are truly courageous. So basically, and the difference between the two is the ones who are truly courageous, they act spontaneously.
Right.
And whereas those who, try to be courageous, they kind of have to put in the effort at doing so. And there is the courage in various aspects of life. So there's a courage, for example, in being proud and confident about your religion as a Shia, for example, as a Shia Muslim, facing basically the beliefs that you have and facing all the questions that you get in doing so. For example, a woman who wears hijab, in my humble opinion, and goes out to the society and faces the society and works in the society and contributes to the society, that requires courage.
Yeah.
A brother or a sister who pray, on time, and try to basically strive to do so, that requires some sort of courage. So that kind of act of courage, which stems from the confidence in one's own belief. And then you have the courage, which basically what you mentioned earlier in the introduction here about facing some danger or facing some issues that might arise that could basically harm or bother or harass other nations, other nationalities, other groups, other faiths. And in doing so, basically, a person is also showing some sign of courage.
Thank you. And now, reflecting on courage, what is the importance of having courage in our life? I mean, a lot of people kind of avoid situations where they have to have courage. So why is it important to have courage?
Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam says, Allah loves a believer, a mu'min, who's courageous and brave, more than that he likes the mu'min who's weak. So a mu'min should always be courageous, should always be out there, because otherwise what will happen is, without courage, your right will be taken away from you. Yeah. I mean, we live at a world, at a time when you have to stand up for your rights. And if you don't do so, then guess what? They'll be taken away from you. And this is not just recent. I mean, especially in the Shia history, since the day that the Prophet ﷺ left this dunya, we had some courageous people who stood in the face of basically the tide that was coming at changing and manipulating the religion of Islam. And without those courageous people like Abu Dhar al-Ghafari standing in the face of basically all these tides going to what's known today as southern Lebanon, Jabal Amil, and they're spreading the message of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam, which we see this, when he planted the seeds, and we look at the fruit of today, how many ulama came from that era, and that area, I mean. We have people like Salman, who went and became a governor. In fact, he was appointed as a governor, and in Madain or Iraq, and there he also planted some seeds, and we see the fruit of these seeds. So we have these courageous individuals, and then you come across people like Hijr ibn Adi at the time of Imam Ali alayhi salam, and you move on to the companions Imam Hussein, and so on and so forth. So throughout the centuries, without these courageous people standing in the face of oppression, standing in the face of manipulation, then the whole religion would have been disintegrated. And if we go in a further scope, it's those courageous people who fight for freedom, for rights, that maintained and saved the lives and the freedom of many others. And that's basically stems from the ayah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَلَوْ لَا دَفْعُ اللَّهِ النَّاسَ بَعْضَهُم بِبَعْضٍ. And if it weren't that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would initiate some people to stand in the face of oppression, in the face of others, then places of worship would have been destroyed. لَهُدِّمَتْ صَوَامِعُ وَبِيَعٌ وَصَلَوَاتٌ وَمَسَاجِدٌ. Temples would have been destroyed, and Allah starts with temples, interestingly. Churches, synagogues,
mosques,
temples, churches, synagogues, churches, and mosques. The ayahs list them in this order, which means basically Islam protects all these places of worship and respects all these places of worship. And if it weren't for people who stand up to face justice and oppression, then such freedoms would have been taken away from people.
I think that's a very good point, because also, well, first of all, we know when Imam Ali alayhi salam, one of the big issues about his attempts to defend Islam against corruption, a lot of financial corruption that was going on at the time, is that one of his main difficulties was that he couldn't find the right number and quality of people to support him, and hence, there was this, he just couldn't quite tip the balance with regards to, the forces that were against him. And of course, because of that, this history has actually continued for, more than 1,000 years, the results of that. So I guess our lack of action, we might think, oh, well, someone else can do it, or it'll be all right tomorrow, but actually our lack of action today means that this issue will continue till tomorrow and coming generations.
Absolutely. I mean, well, Imam Ali in particular, he had a tough political time, in the sense 3 wars were fought, and there were major wars that were fought, battles. So these wars basically drained the energy of his followers and consumed a lot of his time. His Khilafah was only 4 years, 8 months long. And within that, 3 major wars were fought. And he himself says in Nahj al-Balagha, as stated, that if we were given the time and the ability to actually lead and rule, then we would have changed a lot. We would have made a lot of changes, but there was just no time. I mean, he was faced with all these wars, and then people started to get tired, and he lost the sincere companions of his, like Ammar, like Uwais. As he stated also in Nahj al-Balagha on the minbar, crying, saying, where are my companions? I've lost the dear companions of mine. They've all been killed. But it's interesting you mentioned Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, because sometimes when we think of courage, we think of these acts of heroism, that, bravery, and things, which is true, definitely true. But there's another aspect of courage, which basically is the ability to control oneself, the courage to actually submit to the will of God. For example, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, I mentioned a couple nights ago in my lecture that when we think of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, and his bravery, his courage, the first thing that comes to our mind basically is like battles like Badr, like Khaybar, Khandaq, these major battles, and there Imam Ali fighting. And indeed, of course, his courage and his bravery is what brought, victory to Islam. But in my humble opinion, a greater aspect of Imam Ali's courage is displayed after the Prophet's death. And that's where he, I said the following, I said Imam Ali displayed his anger for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which made him win the battles of Khaybar and Badr and Hunayn and so on. But he displayed a greater courage in controlling his anger for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after the Prophet's death. And that's a much harder thing to do, to control your anger for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where for over 2 decades, he started consulting those same people who took his right away from him, who attacked his house, who were responsible for the death of his wife. Yet, when it came to consulting them, he would give them genuine advice, sincere advice. And that, in my humble opinion, is really where the courage of Ali ibn Abi Talib lies, where the bravery of Ali ibn Abi Talib lies, alayhi salam. And he did it again for the sake of the interest of Islam and for the sake of Allah. He looked at the interest of Islam. That act is
he rose above his own personal interests.
That's right, and that's true heroism. That's true bravery. That's true courage. So if we can learn such lessons from Imam Hussein, from Ahlulbayt, Imam Ali alayhi salam, where we put the interest of Islam, the interest of the community, the interest of the society above our own interest, we can really advance further. That's for the true courage there.
I think that's one of the major issues is this balance between, you know, one's own interest and the greater picture, you know, with regard to Islam or with regard to the community. I mean, for example, with regard to what's going on in Syria. Now, I know that this has been quite a dilemma in the minds of a lot of the Muslims in the West, for example, or in countries where they're quite safe. In fact, I had a conversation online with a sister from Lebanon. She got in touch with me, and it was quite interesting to talk about our situations because we're in these different parts of the world. And she said, yes, a lot of our men have gone from Lebanon, you know, over to Syria to defend the shrine, the haram of Sayyidah Zainab, salam alayha. And I said, well, our men over here tend to be more businessmen. So, you know, and they're a little bit kind of nervous and, you know, and they wish they could do something, but, you know, they're not equipped to go over there and actually stand outside the haram, you know. And so what they're doing is that they are trying to give financial support to those who are, you know, for those who are not able to get food and water, and to support those who are defending the shrine. So she said, well, Allah doesn't give anyone a burden greater than they can bear. You know, she's very gracious about it. Yes. But it was an issue that, you know, that I noticed had arisen when, for example, there was a meeting where we had after there was an attack on one of the shrines, and I could see this look in the eyes of particularly the men who were gathered in this meeting, because we had a panel, that they really wanted to do something. They were desperate to do something, but they said we're not, you know, what can we do? Yeah. So is that or if I say to myself, you know, or those of us who are in a comfortable situation, and then you think, well, should I go over there? Should I not go over there? What is courage? Am I being a coward, or is there another way I can be brave?
Right. Well, there are different dimensions of it in this day and age. Now, that's why, for example, with the particular case of Syria, or for example, Bahrain, and other parts of the world where there's oppression taking place, especially against the followers of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam and their shrines, what happens is our maraja have taken a stand also distributing the roles, you know, among the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Our maraja have, you know, none of them, for example, has said everyone needs to go there and defend. You know? So, and there's a reason for it. There are those who need to go ahead and defend the shrines and protect the innocents. But just like you mentioned, other people may have some other resources that they can help with. One resource that people, I think, can help with is, of course, dua. You know, so that dua, I don't think people should underestimate the power of dua. So I think that's something people can actually do quite well. The second thing is financial support, and I think that's really a major thing, not just to support. You know, we're talking about support at least to the families.
Yes.
A lot of families have been displaced. A lot of families are, for example, in Bahrain, a lot of people have been laid off. Even doctors have been laid off, so you have doctors who actually have no income anymore, and they need support. And in other parts of the world as well. So like in Pakistan, for example, a lot of families, unfortunately, have been widowed and orphaned. So they truly need some help, you know. So standing up for those guys is also something not any less courageous than, for example, going to support the shrines and protect the shrines. So supporting those people, I think, it's also important, and an act of courage, because again, you're spending, you're doing something which requires some effort, and not many people like to spend.
Yeah.
So
true.
That, in my humble opinion, again, is an act of courage when just like you control your anger, as we mentioned, when Imam Ali alayhi salam did that, when you actually start spending and start working out, of course, in a balance, you know, not that you stretch yourself so thin for yourself that you don't have enough for your family, but enough to support others. A third thing I think people need to do, and it's also courageous, which is raising awareness. A lot of people, like, I come from Canada. A lot of people in Canada are unaware of what's going on in Bahrain.
Yeah.
Unaware of what's going on in Indonesia and Malaysia, for example, and so on and so forth. We need to raise awareness. This could be done through writing in newspapers, writing articles, writing in local magazines. I even tell a lot of university students if they can write in their own university papers. Every university has its own paper.
Yeah.
And like when I was doing my PhD and my undergrad, people used to read these papers. We had about, 30,000 students at the university, and every time I'm waiting for the bus, I see people reading this paper. So you have about 10,000 people maybe reading these papers or so. So spreading the message, media outlets, having a demonstration. I remember once we had a demonstration for Bahrain, and the anchorman or the news anchor came and and he said, "What do you hope to accomplish? I mean, are you going to change anything?" And I told him, I may not, but I want the people to be aware, to realize that there is something happening there. And I think this act itself is also an act of courage, that you don't keep quiet. You talk about it. And as you mentioned, we live in a part of the world, thank God, where we're blessed with safety, security, and we have freedom of speech and expression. So let's use these tools as well. So these are some things we can do, and it will help those people over there to at least remind them that we are with them. We are thinking about them, and this puts a lot of comfort into their hearts.
That's a good point. I mean, I think also this was something that I was reflecting upon myself. I was thinking, okay, you can look at it another way, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided us with this safety. And that can be utilized for the greater good. As you say, we're over here, so exactly as you say, we can use this as an opportunity. Bit like, as I was reflecting upon those little windows of safety, or relative safety, we could say, that, for example, Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam or Imam Sadiq alayhi salam had during those moments when the pressure was slightly let off them and their followers. They immediately took the opportunity to spread the message, to learn, the true message of Islam, write and spread the message. So, and again, reflecting upon how Islam itself was spread. The Holy Prophet, peace be upon him and his family, used to send some out to battle, but he used to keep some back to learn the Deen and then to transmit it to the next people.
If you think about it, for example, mentioning the examples of Imam al-Baqir and Sadiq alayhim salam, and even Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam, if we take a look at them, now during their times, uprisings used to occur from Ahlulbayt alayhim salam, like Zayd ibn Ali ibn al-Hussein, the son of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, so the brother of Imam al-Baqir. He rose in a revolution. Now, this revolution was not opposed by Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. In fact, it was kind of implicitly, although he warned him, he said that if you're going to go, you're going to get killed. But he did not tell him, don't do it. And then Imam al-Sadiq, had blessings. He said, may Allah bless my uncle Zayd and those who fought with him. Okay. So, in fact, Sheikh al-Saduq in his Amali narrates a conversation between Imam al-Sadiq and one of the men who fought with Zayd ibn Ali ibn al-Hussein alayhi salam. And the man said, I killed 6 people from Ahlul Sham. And the man said, Imam Sadiq says, were you hesitant about killing those people? He said, no, I wasn't. Otherwise, I would not have joined Zayd ibn Ali ibn al-Hussein. He said, may Allah bless my uncle, Zayd ibn Ali ibn al-Hussein. He's in Jannah. Okay. And then his son, Yahya ibn Zayd ibn Ali ibn al-Hussein. So now the cousin of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, he also rose in a revolution, again was killed. Now, again, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam did not oppose. Implicitly, they kind of were not against it. Although Imam al-Sadiq and Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam did not send some of their greatest companions in these battles, because again, they did not want to lose people like Muhammad ibn Muslim, like Abu Basir, like Zurara. Those were the carriers of the knowledge. So you can't lose those people, because if you lose those, you lose the hadith. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, for example, says, may Allah bless Abu Basir, may Allah bless Muhammad ibn Muslim and a couple others, because they were the ones who carried the hadith of my father Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. Okay. And during the time of Imam al-Kadhim, a battle took place known as the Battle of Fakh. The Battle of Fakh, where basically 300 from Bani Hashim got killed, led by a man called Hussein ibn Ali, also interestingly,
Right.
and his mother's name was Zainab. So Imam al-Kadhim also, felt a lot of grief for their death. In fact, they say that the Battle of Fakh, the tragedy of Fakh, is the second greatest tragedy for us after Karbala.
Right.
Yes. And it's referred to in this famous poem of Du'b al-Khuza'i to Imam al-Rida alayhi salam. He says, قُبُورٌ بِطِيبَةٍ وَأُخْرَى بِفَخٍ نَالَهَا صَلَوَاتِي. There are other graves in Fakh where I send my blessings to them.
Where exactly is that location?
That location is on the outskirts of Mecca.
Right.
Okay, so between Mecca and Medina is the place of Fakh. And the battle took place during the time of Al-Hadi al-Abbasi, and basically 300 from Bani Hashim rose in revolution against the Abbasis, and they were killed. And Imam al-Kadhim expressed a lot of grief for those. Now again, Imam al-Kadhim did not promote it, but he did not go against it.
Yeah.
Okay, and Imam al-Rida cries for them, which means they agreed with these revolutions.
Yes. Yeah.
So here we have acts of courage done from Bani Hashim, but the Imam, salamullahi alayhim, or our Imams, they played a different role in directing, okay, so those people want to rise, okay, we don't have a problem with that. In fact, may Allah bless them.
Yeah.
But there are others whom we need to keep them alive. We need to protect those people, the carriers of the knowledge, otherwise the knowledge would disappear of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam. So looking at this example, as you rightly mentioned, we have different roles. There are those who can go and defend and can, let's say, protect the shrines of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, but there are those who need to also finance, there are those who need to propagate the message, and etc., and so on and so forth. So we all then can basically complete the picture.
Thank you very much. We've just got about a few minutes before we go to break, but just to continue this point that you're making, I mean, I suppose one act of courage in this day and age, again, living in non-Muslim countries for followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, is to engage in studying this path, because number one, there's a lot of misunderstanding about Islam. So if you want to study, the knowledge of this path, you then have to face misunderstandings from non-Muslims who think perhaps you're going off to some madrasa in Pakistan and you're going to learn to, become a terrorist or something. And I have literally had conversations with non-Muslims where I would say, oh yes, so-and-so is going out to Iran to study. And they say, well, what are they doing out there? And then I would explain, and they would say, but we didn't know that there's this difference.
That's right, yes.
Between going to study in, say, Najaf or Qom and going to study somewhere else.
That's right, and that goes back to the awareness.
Yeah.
So we can't just keep quiet, because rightly so, we need to tell those people the difference, otherwise they won't know.
So there's that. So you're already going to be suspect if you're just basically engaging in, and I say, well, all people are studying is logic, narrations.
Right.
And then there's the prejudice from the families who say, well, not very good status if you become, as one lady once said to me, God forbid, a Maulana. About her son. So actually studying this deen itself takes courage. And then, of course, the finances, because you're not going to be very well off for a few years.
That's right, exactly, yeah. So all these acts are indeed courageous acts, absolutely. Courage in different dimensions.
Yeah. Well, inshallah, we can, that's definitely to encourage people over in this part of the world to, inshallah, become people of knowledge, to continue to spread the deen as well. And now I'm going to, inshallah, after the break, raise more of a tricky question, which is courage in standing up to corruption in our own communities. Because we know that there is, perhaps it's sometimes easier to stand up to oppression from the outside and to say these people are oppressing us and we're going to be brave and stand up to them.
Right.
What is more difficult is to face corruption within ourselves, within our families, within our communities.
That's sometimes could be, as I mentioned, where the true courage lies. Yes.
Okay, so we are about to go to break, and inshallah we will continue with our discussion, and do feel free to call in with any questions or comments. We're about to go to break for 5 minutes, inshallah. Ahlulbayt TV live, where we are talking about reflecting upon Imam Hussein alayhi salam and those who gave their lives along with him. What is the importance of courage, and how can we have courage to practice this path in this day and age, and in whichever part of the world we are actually in, as a lot of our viewers are watching from countries where it's very difficult to practice actually. I mean, we were just talking just now about people living in the West where you know, one of the biggest challenges of studying this deen in a serious way in order to transmit it to the next generation is the kind of being looked down on by your community or not supported. Then you've got the financial sacrifice as well, or people who might think you're being an extremist in many different ways. Of course, there are people who are watching from Africa as well, from countries that are. We actually have a caller, so we'll take this call. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for your call.
Yeah, I had to call in because, you know, the work you're doing and the talk you're giving is just so important for all of us, you know. That takes courage, and that's something I've learned. It takes courage to speak the truth, doesn't it?
That's true. That's true.
You know, isn't it true all the prophets had to stand up and be courageous and speak in front of tyrants?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true, and in a way, I suppose that's what you're doing.
Trying.
I'm laughing, but you know, it's
Trying.
just nervousness, sister.
Can I ask where you're calling from?
I'm calling from Leicester.
Okay. Can I ask if you could give me an example of where you feel you may have had to be courageous?
Okay, well, I suppose when you first come to Islam from a non-Islamic background,
Yeah.
it takes some courage to have the courage of your convictions.
That's true.
And some people it takes more courage. But I'm finding now that, alhamdulillah, after 25 years of coming to the deen, I'm only really finding out the truth of Ahlulbayt. And I thank you for the work you're doing there, because you've been a big part of opening up the door and the knowledge to us all. But sister and the Imam, one thing we do need for courage is to have a community around us.
Yeah.
And some of us, when we come to the truth from the Sunni way, we find that there isn't a community there to support us.
Yeah.
Because courage does need, we are an ummah, and courage does need brothers and sisters to support us. Yes,
that's an excellent point.
I appreciate you actually mentioning that, sister. You know, it's really important, in my humble opinion, that people who are courageous enough to actually adopt Islam as a way of life and the madhab or the right of Ahlulbayt alayhimus salam as a way of life, in some ways there is some lack in support, and there are ways of overcoming them. There's a sister in Vancouver, Canada, actually, who helped establish the website for reverts to Islam, you know, and especially the madhab of Ahlul Bayt. So she herself is a revert to the religion. She's trying to create this virtual community of those individuals. So maybe, inshallah, if you can send us an email, I can get you in touch with her, and hopefully a community can be made. You could be part of that community.
Okay. Jazakallah khair, brother, but what we need it here where we live. We need it locally.
Yeah.
Right, yes. Well, I guess it's step by step, but I totally agree with you.
Yeah, that's very true, and I think there's a lot of potential there. I know that quite a lot of people are working hard to establish communities in their own way, but and again, of course, being in Leicester, I don't know how big the community is there. So
it's not very big. The problem is, sister, it tends to be from one background.
Right, yeah.
And because it's from mainly one background, it doesn't really take in people coming from outside.
Yeah.
And that is a big problem.
Right.
That must be put right.
Yeah.
No, it's definitely something that needs to be addressed. I agree with you.
Inshallah, we can do more talks on that, actually. I think we can have more programs on that, again, to raise awareness.
Absolutely. And Jazakallah khair for your courage that you are giving, because it's beautiful and we're in desperate need of it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for calling in, sister, and bringing those points. And inshallah, we'll definitely continue that with our discussion as well. And now we have another caller on the line, so we'll take this call. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. Sister Rebecca and Brother Usama, I'd like to congratulate you on the topic for today, and also for the sister who previously had to call in, just listening to her. I myself am a revert to Shia Islam from a Sunni background, and I completely understand the isolation that she must feel and the courage it takes to actually go out within the community.
Yeah.
It is a difficult situation to be in, because although you are trying to come towards the Ahlulbayt, sometimes you do feel that isolation, particularly when you go to the mosques, everything not fitting in, you seem to stick out like a sore thumb. So I completely understand. The reason I called in was just to impart some information. There's a Facebook page that has been dedicated to sisters who have reverted from other communities to Islam, and it's open to Sunni, Shia, and everything. And it's a way we are connecting. I'm based in Birmingham, but I often come to Leicester, and we're often organising events where people can get together, particularly for Eid and things like that, where they do feel a little bit alone and isolated from the rest.
Right.
Well, that's courageous of you to do so. So I really commend your efforts. Well done.
I haven't done this myself. A sister in Birmingham actually set this up. So I'm not going to take any credit for this. I just happened to be added onto that page, and I thought it's something that may be useful for the sister who called earlier.
That's excellent. Could you? What's the name of the page?
You know what? I wish I could remember, and it's just slipped my mind. But I'm going to call back with the details. My daughter's actually got my mobile phone, so I can't even access it.
How about you email the details to Ahlulbayt TV? I think
I'll
it's
do that.
info
at
ahlulbayt.tv.
Yeah.
Info at ahlulbayt.tv.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll do that as soon as I get a chance.
Please email that, and then we request the sister who called previously to send an email as well.
And then we can
connect you two together. So hopefully that'll create this community, not just a virtual community, but really a real community.
Inshallah, and please feel free to pass my details over to her, because I completely understand where she may be coming from as well. Having been a Sunni for most of my growing years.
Great, so we'll await your email, inshallah, sister. Thank you very much.
That would be great. Thank
Allah
you.
bless
Thank
you.
you very
Thanks
much.
for calling in.
Thank you. That's excellent, and it's good to have. Yeah, I mean, actually, this is something that we've been talking about. You know, Bahrain and Syria and everything. But also, I mean, I would say, yeah, coming to path of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam from the Sunni path often actually takes more courage than just converting to Islam in general.
Well, even converting to Islam, I think it's very courageous. I mean, changing a way of life, adopting a new style, a new way of thinking, a new way of living. It's not easy. It's not easy. I mean, think about migrating maybe from Canada to the UK could be a challenge. I mean, driving is on the opposite side of the road. I mean, that minor change in life it could be challenging. Now imagine when you're going through a whole transition, where it's not just you're changing countries, you're changing an entire way of living, you know, adopting a new way of life. Whether being following Islam or following the madhab of Ahlul Bayt alayhim wassalam. So it does really require conviction, and does really require a lot of courage to demonstrate this. I know a brother, for example, in the US, he converted to Islam from Hinduism.
Okay.
He was, you know, so afraid of his parents finding out, because he was a young man at the time. He said, I used to pray in the bathroom.
Wow.
You know, I would just, you know, I would not want my mom and dad to see me. And he says the first time, and I used to lock the room and I would pray. He said one time I forgot to lock my room, and my mom walked in and she went out screaming. You know, so they were shocked. You know, he says eventually, being parents, of course, they love me.
Yeah.
So they kind of gave in. You know, they kind of understood where I was coming from. But it does require a lot of courage. When I was hearing him, I was like, subhanallah, this young man, he was in his teens at the time, and he went through all this difficulty, you know, to adopt this new way of life, you know, trying to figure things out, how to work things out. So it does require a lot of courage, and that's really the courage that I was talking about, where when I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, when a mu'mina, when a sister goes out with hijab, that's really a true act of heroism, a true act of courage, because you're really fighting your willpower here, you're controlling your willpower here, and that's true courage. You mentioned that, courage to stand up to families, to internal corruption, to internal affairs. True. I mean, in my humble opinion, again, I find that, sometimes some families try to have a wedding, and this wedding may not be Islamic. Mixed gatherings, music, and they say it's just once in a lifetime opportunity, so let's go ahead and do whatever it is, right? It's just once, why not? And I find a lot of people saying, well, I know this is not really Islamic, but I have to go because it's my cousin, or it's my sister, my brother, my relative. What will the others say about me? And I tell people, well, you got to think about what will Allah say. I mean, do you think that Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam would be pleased in you attending this wedding right here? Would he attend such a wedding? And if not, then basically you got to say no. And it requires a lot of courage to stand up to the family and say, you know what, I'm sorry, I will not come to this wedding. Because he or she will be boycotted. I mean, unfortunately, there will be a backlash from the community. And it's tough. It's tough when your own family members, when your own community.
I think social backlashes are actually, as you say, social pressure and social backlashes are very difficult to face.
And you see, we say, the hadith says that towards the end of time, those who want to hold on to their religion is like holding to a burning charcoal. And in some cases, because you find even your own community is not willing to accept you, and certain practices of yours. And these sisters that have just called in, and they say that, we don't feel accepted in the community, or like we don't feel like, welcomed in some cases. That's tough. It's going through that. You feel like isolated.
It can damage your confidence. I mean, for example, I signed up with a tutoring agency, and they have profiles of their tutors on their webpage. So in the interview they were saying, the work will start coming in about September. Like all the students sort of want to retake, and just wait for the phone to start ringing. And so there's a picture of me on there with my hijab, and there hasn't been a single phone call. And you know why it is. And also when you're going for the job interview, that when you're going to put your picture up on there for people to choose you as a tutor, you know very well exactly what people are going to be thinking. So all this is going to be going on in your head, and it can undermine your confidence, because you say, I wonder what this person is really thinking, or I know that I haven't been chosen because I've got a hijab.
And that's a society now. This is beyond your community. This is the whole society's perspective, and you got to deal with the whole society at large. And that's why I say, every woman who actually puts on the scarf in the world, even sometimes in Eastern part of the world, even there it's become challenging sometimes in some areas. So I really salute every woman. Actually, personally, she's like a walking, embodiment of Islam. And a courageous act, right, in action, so that I really have a lot of respect for. And my basically message to all those women is just to keep strong, keep confident. It's not easy. You go through a lot of difficulties, I understand. But guess what, at the end of the day, deep inside, you're doing the right thing. Deep inside, you know that Allah is pleased with you. And that can basically be your motivation and your source of tranquility. So facing these pressures is not easy, and that's where a lot of courage is required. And especially, like you said, when it's your own community, when it's your own society. But in my opinion, I think people need to stand up. You cannot just keep quiet just because she's my sister, or he's my brother, or he's my uncle, whatever. If I see something wrong in the community, I need to speak out. Now, even if it means that people will backlash. I mean, when we think of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, let's look at his stand. He did not appoint Zubair and Talha as governors. And he was told that these guys want some position. You can avoid the entire war if you appoint them. Just give them something. And he says, these people have interests. They have agendas. and me being a Khalifa, I'm responsible for their actions. How can I appoint someone like them?
Yeah.
And even they told him about Muawiyah. He was advised, keep Muawiyah on Sham, and then until your governor, your government becomes strong and powerful, and then you get him out. For now, just leave him. And then he won't fight against you. He said, what am I going to tell Allah?
Yeah.
How can I have such a person in power? How can I approve of him in power? And hence, some people say that Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam was a weak politician because he just couldn't, he didn't know how to play politics. And in my opinion, it's not about being politician. If we define politician as the end justifies the mean, then yes, Ali was a very weak politician. But if we define it as honesty and integrity and transparency, then Ali was the best politician. He did not accept corruption. So when we see this stand of Ali ibn Abi Talib, where 3 wars were fought because of his belief in Allah, then this courage that he had to engage in such battles. Now, the Muslims fought with them, and he was not responsible. We can't blame him for it. We can't say, oh, what he did is wrong. What he did was the absolute truth, because even there's a Sunni scholar by the name of Mahmoud Abbas Al Attar. He says that people blame Ali ibn Abi Talib for standing up to the truth. Let's see, what would have happened if he had not stood up for the truth? Then what consequences Islam would have had? So when we see Imam Ali standing up for justice, speaking against corruption, then I have to do the same thing. I got to stand up in the face of my cousin's wedding. Or I see someone in the community, for example, a president of an organization or in the community doing something that I don't think is right. I need to stand up for them and I say, you know what, this is wrong. I don't approve of this. Of course, doing it in the manner and the etiquette of presenting things, talking to them privately, not exposing everyone publicly with a massive email like some people do, but rather approaching it, the right steps. We cannot keep quiet. That's an act of courage. That's, I think, where true courage lies.
I would say also, actually, to have the courage not to even have the kind of wedding, those fancy weddings for yourself, when you know that that kind of ostentation and showing off of wealth, and often it's not real wealth, sometimes it's just a show, is kind of disliked.
It's a pretentious lifestyle. That's, you do this, I'll do better.
But yeah, exactly. And so it's like, some people think, well, we have to have the enormous limo, and we have to kind of have like have the reception in the Hilton, and because so-and-so had their wedding here and they're going to look down on it. And this goes on a lot as well, people actually looking down on the next person because of they don't have wealth, and this is completely un-Islamic as well. And so there has to be that stand where, no, I'm going to have the same kind of wedding that Imam Ali alayhi salam and Lady Fatima salam alayha had. No limo, it's going to be an ordinary car, and it's going to be a modest reception.
Well, it requires that courageous soul to start it. And it's really hard.
And I'm going to take people looking down on me.
I think we need to strike a balance. Strike a balance. Like Allah says, قُلْ مَنْ حَرَّمَ زِينَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي أَخْرَجَ لِعِبَادِهِ. Who has forbidden the zina, the ornaments of Allah that He has brought out to His servants? And so you strike a balance. I mean, you don't go to this far, to this extreme or to that extreme, right? Like Allah says, eat and drink, but do not extravagate. So balance.
Balance. Thank you very much. And we have another call on the line, which we'll take. Assalamu alaikum.
Hello. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
How are you, Sheikh?
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, I just wanted to find out in this month of Muharram what kind of amal practices should we be doing leading up to Ashura and on the day of Ashura as well.
Thank you very much for your call. Thank you.
Well, for detailed a'mal, I would refer you to Kitab Mafatihul Jinan, the book of Mafatihul Jinan, which tells you what certain a'mal specifically to be done on a daily basis and on the day of Ashura. In general, a'mal is to show the signs of grief on this month, to basically appear in a mood of grief and sadness for the remembrance of Ahlulbayt alayhimus salam. Generally speaking, to raise the message of Ahlulbayt alayhimus salam, to keep their message alive. That would be the kind of general overview. in this month of Muharram and the month of Safar. Specific a'mal, specific details, if you can please refer to Mafatih al-Jinan, a book of dua by Sheikh Abbas al-Qummi, which could be found online as well. There you can find specific a'mal to be done on specific days of this holy month of Muharram.
It can be found on du'as.org.
Du'as.org and other places. So
I mean, fasting is still actually recommended for these days, the same as the other schools, isn't
right.
it? Fasting.
But not on the day of Ashura.
Not on the
day of Ashura, it's makruh to fast on that day for us.
And reading Ziyarat Imam Hussein and
Ziyarat Ashura, reading it, I think Ziyarat Ashura, it's a great habit personally to get in the habit of reading Ziyarat Ashura on a daily basis. And I think the month of Muharram and Safar are a good opportunity for us to get in that habit. Every day to read Ziyarat Ashura, maybe after Salat al-Subh, you read Ziyarat Ashura, and you begin your day basically with pledging your allegiance to Ahlulbayt alayhim salam. Inni waliyun liman walakum. I am a supporter of those who support you, you know. And I disassociate myself from those who disassociate themselves from you. So, and Ziyarat Ashura, I think it's a good habit to get into reading it on a daily basis. Among other a'mal as well, as I mentioned, you know, if you refer to du'as.org or Mafatih al-Jinan, you'll get the details there as to what needs to be done.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We just got another call on the line, which we'll take. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Mrs. Ali from Toronto.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Rahmatullah to you also. First, I would mention that I had the opportunity to hear you at Muslim Congress last year, I believe. And I still fail to find that lecture anywhere in archives on your website. I really love it because I also read political economics of the current era. And so it is very distressing to read all that. But I love your lecture and I fail to find a copy of it.
Inshallah,
I commend you for your views.
Inshallah, I think they usually take about 9 months to put it up online. But if you keep searching, maybe after about another 6 months, they should have it up online.
Okay,
Inshallah.
Thank you for that. Okay, well, I joined in this discussion of yours. I opened my TV a little while back, about half an hour. And so I heard the two sisters talking about challenges at the community level. I wish to know about challenges at household and family level. Having kids in their early and late teens and migrating to West, growing up here to become young adults. Obviously, they are going to pick up influences of the environment. And it's very challenging to keep a guard on them and to keep dictating and advising regarding Islamic virtues and all. It is really challenging, and you are labeled as an extremist and, you know, very forceful, despite having had the background training and knowledge of Islam from back home, as much as one could. So how do you handle this challenge? And the second question is that there is this upcoming young person, a Sunni, interested in Shia Islam and interested in a Shia girl. But obviously the boy's family is difficult to convince and it is back home. But how do you convince what suggestions you would recommend that one could guide that person who is halfway here, halfway there, to guide him towards the Shia Islam, so that when he really finally makes up his mind regarding the Shia girl, at least they would not start off with in a boat which would land nowhere. And the next generation are likely to suffer. I sincerely need advice regarding this, and I'd appreciate.
Okay. Thank you so much for your call, and I'm sure many other people are also facing many similar issues. We just have a couple of minutes, so if the Sheikh could answer.
Well, the first point with regards to the children, it is very challenging indeed. If possible, to send them for ziyarah trip, that I think would have a huge influence on them. if possible, to go with them to Umrah or Hajj. I know the cost is a bit, especially from Toronto, Canada, it's a bit costly to do these things, but if possible, try to do these things, and this will have a huge impact on them. A second is try to associate them with the right group of people. Make sure they hang out with the right friends. I know as teenagers it's a bit difficult to do this, but if you try to create that environment for them, then inshallah maybe that will work out. And the third, try to always encourage them to maintain their salat, their fasting, those deeds, and attending the majalis to the best of your ability. That I think will keep them in this environment, inshallah. And try to explain things to them. Try to always talk to them, so this way they understand what they're doing. As for the latter question, that brother, I think one way to really attract such people to the madhab of Ahlul Bayt, by us showing the true teachings of Ahlul Bayt, and one of the essence of them is the akhlaq. Yeah. The manners. The people who surround this individual, they really have to show them how grateful we are as followers of Ahlul Bayt, and how kind we are. Second is guide them to certain websites like al-islam.org to read some more about the madhab of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam.
Thank you very much, Sheikh Usama Al Attar, and thank you very much for your calls. And inshallah, please tune in again tomorrow with Haji al-Rauf, and we'll take more calls then. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.